Jeffries, Democrat from New York. He'll lead the Congressional Black Caucus tonight in speeches from the House floor on Ferguson. And MSNBC analyst and retired ATF analyst Jim Kavanaugh. Thank you both for being here.
Good evening, Reverend
Thanks,
Sharpton.
Reverend.
Congressman Jeffries, the Congressional Caucus speaking tonight. Civil rights leaders, all of us just meeting with the president and vice president. I was in Ferguson over the weekend talking to faith leaders. Have we reached a tipping point?
Well, we have an epidemic of police violence in this country. We've got a clear national problem, and that's why it requires national intervention, which is why many of us were pleased that the president brought together civil rights community, young activists, law enforcement officials today. That's why the Congressional Black Caucus is going to speak from the House floor on being in America. What does Ferguson say about where we are and where we need to go? Because we've got three issues that we really have to confront. It's unacceptable, Reverend Sharpton, that young, innocent, unarmed African-American men continue to be gunned down by police officers across the nation. It's unacceptable that we've got a broken criminal justice system that continues to fail to deliver accountability when police officers engage in excessive use of force. And it's unacceptable that we've got prosecutors, such as the one down in Missouri, that fail to take their responsibility seriously to do justice for victims and families of those who've been victimized by police violence. And so we're at an important moment right now. We need a sustained response, and we're looking forward at the Congressional Black Caucus to being part of the solution.
Jim, a critical piece of the president's initiative, $75 million for 50,000 body cameras for police. How important is that?
Well, it's a great move, Reverend Al. I mean, look, body cameras for police is good for the police. It's good for the citizens. It's good for all of us. It'll exonerate good cops if they're falsely accused. And if there's a bad apple in the bunch, the camera's going to show it up. So it's very, very positive. You know, most of the time cops act good, but you've just shown a litany of these terrible cases where police sort of rush headlong into the thing. The shots are fired in a matter of a second or two, and it's too hastily done. So we do need the body cameras. I agree with the congressman. I think the Black Caucus being leaders on this is critical, because what I see is so much of the history of American civil rights not sort of absorbed by officers across the line. And that we need to start with the history first. It may make them understand where the citizens are coming from.
You know, Congressman Jeffries, one of the things that struck me about the meeting this afternoon, and I was very candid and said I've been to a lot of meetings. This was just 30 of us civil rights leaders and law enforcement heads, mayors, the mayor of Philly, the mayor of New York, and others. And I was tired of meetings, but that I had faith this president understood and would deal with things differently. And he talked very directly to us in private and then to the media about how he looked at this personally. Listen to this.
There have been commissions before, there have been task forces, there have been conversations, and nothing happens. What I try to describe to people is why this time will be different. And part of the reason this time will be different is because the President of the United States is deeply invested in making sure that this time is different. In the 2 years I have remaining as President, I'm going to make sure that we follow through. Not to solve every problem, not to tear down every barrier of mistrust that may exist, but to make things better.
People have heard a lot of talk before, and the frustration you hear in Congress, Congressman, I hear in civil rights and in media, law enforcement hears it, even the grassroots young activists hear it. Do people want to see something real to address this disparity in how justice is dealt in this country?
Absolutely. People are dying in communities all across America, as you pointed out, Reverend Sharpton, in the East New York community I represent in Brooklyn, where we had a young, unarmed, innocent African-American gunned down with a kill shot right through his chest into his heart by an officer who claims it was an accident. And so people don't want words. We need action. The beautiful thing about what the president did today is he brought important stakeholders together, but immediately announced some changes that he is going to place, beginning with setting aside funding for 50,000 body cameras, which I think will help with this issue of accountability, exonerate innocent officers, but also tell truthful stories when excessive force is used by the police. We've got to strike the right balance in this country between public safety on the one hand and respecting the civil rights and civil liberties and the constitutional rights, particularly of communities of color. At this moment in time, the president is the right man to lead the charge on that, with all of us supporting him.
Well, talking about that, Jim, him being the right man, I sat next to Vice President Biden throughout the meeting, directly across from the president, and Vice President Biden is considered a real friend of the American police. Do the American police need a sea change in order for this to work?
Yes, I think they do. I think law enforcement has to accept the leadership from the president and the Congress here. They should hear the people speaking. You know, what can we do? What flaws do we have? How can we make policing better? Most modern police commanders and police officers and the police groups and unions want to do that too. Body cameras is one step. Thoughtful policing, Rev, you know, you're not rushing in headlong. You're maybe maneuvering a little better, can diffuse a lot of these situations. And recruiting officers from these minority communities. You know, if the kids in the minority communities hate the police, they're not going to want to be the police. And if we also arrest them on every time they spit on the sidewalk or sell a loose cigarette, and then we bar them from being the police because of their criminal record, we're not going to move the country forward. We got to rethink how we do that. These minor charges, keeping the minority children out of wanting to be the cops. They should want to have careers in law enforcement. We should recruit them. There's nothing more important than somebody from your community who's policing it.
Now, a lot of this will be applied on a local level, Congressman. When we came out, we talked to the press in front of the West Wing, Mayor Nutter, Mayor de Blasio, myself, Mark Morial, Irvin Lee. And one of the things that is going to really be determined by this is whether this is progress or not, is the recommendations on the use of military equipment by local police departments, which will be governed by mayors. And the recommendations are developing a consistent list of allowable equipment, local civilian review of requests and acquisitions of equipment, and mandatory policies and training for police departments. How important, Congressman, is it to address the militarization of local police departments?
Well, this is extremely important, Rev. I mean, one of the things that stunned a lot of Americans, blacks, whites, people from the north, the south, the east, and the west, was the fact that the Ferguson Police Department, in the aftermath of the shooting and killing of Michael Brown, responded as if this was a military operation on foreign soil, as opposed to dealing with protests right here in an American city. And so we've got to deal with this issue of unnecessary military equipment being given to law enforcement agencies all across the country without the proper training, being used in inappropriate contexts that often inflame a situation rather than calm a situation down. I voted against this program continuing, as many of my colleagues did, on both the left and the right, and I think Congress has got to have a conversation after the president's announcements today about how we continue this program and whether it's an appropriate program for us to even consider doing as we move forward.
Congressman Hakeem Jeffries and Jim Kavanaugh, thank you both for your time tonight. We'll be watching you tonight, Congressman Jeffries, and later in the show I have more to say on this issue. Coming up,